Recently, myself and my husband had our court hearing on the 6th of July 2023, and to cut a long story short, we bought a block of land in February 2021. We had an aspiration to convert it back into whenua Māori, to Māori title, native title, because it becomes really difficult from there on, for us, for any of our mokopuna, our descendants, to sell it. And that might sound economically like not a great idea, but for me as a mother, knowing that I've increased the chances of my mokopuna having somewhere to live is really beautiful to me. And my husband shares that value. So after buying it, you essentially have to have no mortgage on the property. That's how you're able to do this. And able to apply to the Māori Land Court because there's nobody to object, right? There's no one objecting to the transfer from general title to Māori land. And I go more into this in my workshops and my programs, which you can find out about by either messaging me or making a comment below. So after having the judge approve our transfer, I decided it just felt like a release, and a whole lot of pent-up resentment that I've had on the simmer and grief and loss that I've had on the simmer was released. And so I had some time to reflect, and I did this through a couple of Facebook posts. For those of you who follow me, you would have seen them. Actually, I might just grab one and read one out. That makes sense for me right at the minute. So let me see. The first one, actually, because it's Grief Centre, I might read out the second one. I'm not sure. Let's see. Yeah, I will. As I reflect on what I've learned the last 3 cases I've had with the Māori Land Court, I'm fairly certain now that greedy, inadequate, hurt, grieving, potentially dim-witted trustees and owners are the reason we suffer around land issues. Greed is the main one. As soon as I stopped being in the same place and listening to these huas, instead going straight to the judge to have them sorted out, it gets sorted, and with no stress. The last ridiculous thing that was emailed to me was that if I didn't agree to a sale of my share of whenua Māori, I'd be taken to the High Court and forced to sell. This is a family land too, by the way, that I'm talking about. I'm also full-time in this area of work, so they had to be very certain that they could convince me that I was wrong just through mere bullying. Recruiting siblings and my direct family members as well. I knew they were lying and gaslighting me at the same time. Not being a dummy, living 6 hours south of that space gave me breathing space, thinking space, time to plan my cases. But the people carrying the message to me were so certain of the people, the bullies' message, I figured I better triple, quadruple, five-druple check what I know about the Māori Land Act. The High Court doesn't make people sell their share of freehold Māori land. They don't deal with Māori land, full stop. I'm coming for the liars and crooks now. It's taken 5 years, but I'm only 41. Let's do the next 10 years like this. I have the energy and the focus. Photo of Lizzo, because it's bad bitch o'clock. So that was my post. And on reflection, how do I feel about it? 100% aligned. That's how I feel about it. That's what I wrote. That's what I've carried around with me on the daily. And here's the part that I want to share in today's grief center. The origins of Grief Center, this podcast idea, was actually not so much about dealing with my grief and my resentment. It was about watching who I used to think were good people, family members, Whanau, and watching them like a movie throughout my life in my mind's eye, and noticing a demise. The choices and the behaviors they have now shown over the last, say, 10, say 14 years, for me was abhorrent. For me, it looks like greed. For me, it looks like treachery. It looks wrong. Looks like bullying. Looks like toxic patriarchy. And when you get to know me, you'll know that being very honest and truthful, and upfront about it, like saying that's wrong. That's not the right answer. That's not the right way of doing it. That's stealing. Or saying something like, I can see the signature on this will and it's not yours. I think you've forged something. That kind of thing. Once I got back to New Zealand from Australia, I didn't realise that turning a blind eye to that kind of behaviour was normal. It isn't normal. It isn't well. It's corrupt. That is naughty. But when you are in these spaces, I'm saying it now as if I'm knowledgeable and wise. I'm wiser about it now because I have no desire to continue getting hurt by these kinds of people and behaviours. And so in order to be able to practice patience and take a step back away from the messy behaviours, these messy people, and to hold my tongue and to make a plan where I wasn't always going to get hurt and where I wasn't going to affect and pass on the raruraru and the trauma onto my children. In order to do that for the last 5 years or more, I've had to learn how to pause and change nothing and no one for a time until I can see a clear path forward, take the steps, go to the Māori Land Court as my current example, execute the plan and work it all out, okay? And so the podcast wasn't about dealing with my grief. It was about understanding or trying my best to make sense of where does the paru behaviour come from. And I did this practice. I looked at them. I looked at what they were doing and I thought, what comes just before that? So when I started noticing the behaviours come up, sort of slightly greedy, self-centered behaviour, slightly, ended up very much so, but slightly. Let's say I track back to that time period and I go 10, 15, 5 years ago, what have you. What was happening around that time? Okay, cool, I can see something. Go back another 5 or 10 years, track back. Start remembering the stories that I heard them share or others share about what their childhood or their teen years were like. So what I landed on, what I found in this scan audit is beyond what is now greed, resentment, anger, treachery, was actually a lot of sadness, grief, not having a voice, not being recognized, not being given a chance, being so much in, not the public eye, but like so much in the community iwi space. I think it happens for people in churches as well, from what I can understand, like pastors' children. And when I look at that, what they feel they've gone through or went through, and then come forward and see that for them that probably translates as a lack of opportunity or loss of opportunity in their youth, come through to their middle-aged years. Yeah, okay, I can see how you're so sick of going without or feeling unseen or having no voice that as soon as an opportunity comes for you to be in a position of power, you're taking it. You're not asking anymore, you're taking it. Now, I'm not an angel and I'm not saying that I'm right about how the behavior of greed and poor decisions and self-centeredness came into play, but that, what else can I do? I can't just sit here going, oh my God, how do these people behave like this? And constantly have this circular argument that is not going to go anywhere but hurt me in my peace. But the practice of going back and keep going back before all of those behaviors go, what was the origin? I started to see that grief, some form of grief, whether it was the grief of not being seen, not being heard, not being recognized, all of those things are possibly the origin of the poor behavior that I see today. And that was the background behind Grief Center podcast. How to recognize and potentially understand other people's actions so that I could have my own peace back for myself.